You know that feeling when you realize someone you trusted could destroy your entire life with a single conversation? That moment when love turns into leverage, when intimacy becomes evidence, when the person who knows you best becomes the person you fear most. Most of us never act on that fear. We break up, we move on, we rebuild. But what happens when moving on means prison? What happens when the person who could end you is also the mother of your child? On September 6, 2025, Romeca Meeks died. 3 days later, a man scrubbed his social media clean, deleting posts about $10,000 Navy federal card cracks, erasing evidence of a hustle he'd been running since 2014. The courts would later say something that's never been said in American legal history. He had motive and interest to testify against a deceased woman. Not a living suspect. A dead one. His own baby mama. This isn't a story about a murder investigation, though that's certainly part of it. This is a story about the impossible mathematics of street economics, where making money means creating evidence, and creating evidence means trusting people who might not stay loyal forever. It's about a woman caught between motherhood and survival, between protecting the father of her child and protecting herself. And it's about a question that haunts every corner of this case. Was Romeca Meeks a good mom who simply knew too much? Or was she something else entirely? We've all kept secrets for people we love. White lies, omissions, strategic silences that protect someone from consequences. It feels noble in the moment, doesn't it? You're being loyal. You're being ride or die. You're proving your love can withstand truth. But there's a line, invisible and shifting, where keeping someone's secret stops being loyalty and becomes complicity. Where your silence makes you an accomplice. Where what you know transforms from private knowledge into criminal liability. Romeca Meeks lived on that line for years. And the man on the other side? Carlos Rico. Street name, Los. A name that law enforcement had been tracking since 2014, when 29 defendants faced state and federal charges in a massive card-cracking scheme that defrauded banks of $1.7 million. The indictment named an organization, the Rack Boys, a faction out of Chicago's South Side that used rap music, social media, and street parties to recruit people willing to surrender their debit cards, PINs, and passwords. The operators would deposit fraudulent checks, withdraw up to $5,000 before the banks caught on, then disappear into the digital shadows. 29 people got caught in that 2014 sweep. 29 lives upended, families destroyed, futures canceled. But here's what doesn't make sense. In 2026, more than a decade later, there's still a man operating under the name Rack Los. Still posting on Instagram. Still advertising Navy federal cracks for $10,000 or better. Still standing while everyone else from that original crew either went to prison, changed their names, moved out of state, or found legitimate hustles. How does the last rat boy keep standing when everyone else fell? Subscribe if you want to understand how street economics, motherhood, and federal investigations collide in ways that make murder look like self-preservation. This story will make you question everything you think you know about loyalty, because by the end, you'll understand why the court said Carlos had motive and interest to silence a woman who is already dead. Let me paint you a picture of Romeca before any of this darkness touched her life. She wasn't a criminal mastermind. She wasn't a hustler. She was a mother trying to make it work in an economy that punishes single parents, especially Black women, with a brutality that's almost surgical in its precision. While Carlos was out there flashing cash and posting videos with stacks of hundreds, Romeca was selling eyelashes out of a vending machine. Read that again. Vending machine eyelashes. In 2025, she was competing with Pokemon cards and gumballs for customer attention. Think about the economics of that for a second. The overhead on a vending machine business. The location fees, the restocking time, the razor-thin margins on beauty products that women can buy cheaper on Amazon. This wasn't a woman living large off fraud proceeds. This was a woman grinding in the most legitimate, most exhausting way possible, trying to build something legal while the father of her child was allegedly running the same scam that got 29 people indicted a decade earlier. But here's what made Romeca dangerous. She knew. She knew about the money orders Carlos kept in his suitcase, The ones he mentioned casually on social media when he complained about her burning $10,000 worth during one of their fights. She knew about the Navy federal posts. She knew about the deposit histories showing $30,000 appearing in accounts belonging to a man with no documented employment, no personal training business generating that kind of revenue, no legitimate explanation for that kind of cash flow. She knew because when you share a bed with someone, when you share a child, when you share a life, you see the truth that lives behind the Instagram facade. You see the stress when the feds start circling. You see the panic when old crew members start cooperating. You see the calculations happening in real time. Who knows what, who might talk, who poses a risk. And Romeca posed a risk. Their relationship was combustible in the way that only happens when money, pride, and shared history collide. In 2018, Carlos went live on social media, showing his apartment in chaos, clothes on the floor, belongings scattered everywhere. He told his followers that Romeca had destroyed his stuff again, that she'd burned his suitcase, that inside that suitcase were money orders worth $10,000. He said it casually, like it was just relationship drama, just his girl acting crazy. But listen to what he actually said. My loss has been crazy. Not she's crazy. Losses. Plural. Ongoing. This wasn't the first time. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern of a woman who knew how to hurt him where it mattered most, his money. Now ask yourself, why would a woman burn $10,000 in money orders? Spite? Anger? Or something else? Maybe she was sending a message. Maybe she was saying, I know where this money comes from. I know what you're doing. And if you push me too far, I'll make sure it all burns. That's not just relationship drama. That's leverage. That's power. That's a woman who understood exactly what kind of information she possessed and exactly how much damage she could do with it. But here's the thing about leverage in the streets. It only protects you as long as the other person believes you won't use it. The moment they think you might actually talk, might actually cooperate, might actually become a witness instead of a silent partner, that's when leverage becomes liability. That's when the person who could protect you decides you're the biggest threat they face. Fast forward to 2025. Romeca and Carlos are locked in a custody battle that's getting uglier by the month. On June 18, 2025, Romeca tells the court something revealing about another woman in Carlos's life, a woman named Holly. She says Holly doesn't have a job, doesn't have anything to lose, implies she's dangerous in a way that only someone familiar with street economics would recognize. But here's the mirror nobody wants to look at. Romeca was describing herself. No traditional employment, no assets that could be seized, nothing to lose except her child and her freedom. What happens when two people in that exact situation, both with nothing to lose, both knowing secrets that could bury the other, decide they've had enough? The court documents from January 2026 contain a phrase that legal experts say they've never seen before in American jurisprudence. The judge wrote that Carlos had motive, interest, and bias to testify in a certain way, particularly when the person he formerly had a child with is now deceased. Read that carefully. The court is saying he has motivation to shape a narrative about a dead woman, to testify against her even though she can't defend herself, to paint her in a light that serves his interests now that she's gone. But what interests? What narrative? If Romeca died in some tragic accident, some random act of violence unconnected to Carlos, why would he need to testify against her at all? Why would the court identify motive and bias in his statements about a deceased person unless there was a reason, a pattern, a concern that he was manipulating the story of her death to protect himself from something bigger? Let me take you back to September 6th, 2025, the day Romeca died. That same weekend, Carlos is on video at what appears to be a retail store, using a card for a purchase. Nothing unusual about that except for one detail. The people analyzing the footage, the people who understand card fraud patterns, immediately clocked something wrong with that transaction. The card, the behavior, the timing, all of it screamed fraud. Same weekend his baby mama dies. He's allegedly still running the same scam that should have ended his freedom in 2014. 3 days after Romeca's death, Carlos's social media undergoes a purge. The 10K or better for any Navy Federal posts vanish. The Rack Boy Los branding stays because that's identity, that's legacy, that's the name he's been building for over a decade. But the specific evidence of ongoing fraud?
Gone.
Scrubbed. Deleted like it never existed. You don't clean up your digital footprint after a loved one dies unless you're expecting investigators to start looking. You don't erase evidence of your hustle unless you think someone might have already told authorities exactly where to look. And you definitely don't do it 3 days after the person who knew all your secrets stops breathing. Here's what keeps me up at night about this case. The question of what Romeca was planning to do with everything she knew. The court documents suggest she wasn't just a passive victim, wasn't just a woman who happened to know too much. The blurred footage, the redacted sections, the way the prosecutors keep referencing Witness 1 with unusual caution, all of it suggests Romeca might have already started talking. Maybe not to police directly, but to lawyers during the custody battle. Maybe in depositions. Maybe in court filings that would become public record. Because here's how it works in family court. You want to prove someone's an unfit parent? You document their income sources. You question their employment claims. You force them to explain under oath where the money's coming from, how they're affording their lifestyle, what they do for a living. Romeca had a 3-month-old baby at the time of her death. The custody battle was active, ongoing, escalating. Every court appearance was another opportunity for her lawyers to ask Carlos to explain his finances, his business, his cash flow. Every court date was another chance for the truth to come out. And if Romeca was willing to testify about his income, if she was willing to detail the money orders, the card cracks, the pattern of fraud that never stopped even after 29 people got indicted, that's not just losing custody. That's federal time. That's decades in prison. That's the difference between being the last rat boy standing and being the next defendant in an indictment that should have included him back in 2014. Let's talk about the original Rack Boys case because understanding 2014 is essential to understanding why 2025 might have ended the way it did. When federal prosecutors announced the indictment, they weren't just charging individuals. They were charging an organization, a crew, a social media-enabled fraud ring that operated openly, brazenly, almost daring law enforcement to catch them. The indictment specifically named the Rack Boys, described their Facebook and Twitter accounts, their YouTube videos, their rap music that literally described the mechanics of card cracking. One video was titled "For the Money." In it, defendants wore Rack Boy shirts and displayed large amounts of cash while rapping about the exact crimes they were committing. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't hidden. It was a flex, a celebration, a middle finger to the system that they believed they'd outsmarted. 29 people got caught in that net. Some took plea deals. Some went to trial. Some cooperated. The organization fractured, with some members rebranding as the Band Clan, trying to distance themselves from the legal heat that came with the Rack Boys name. Smart ones moved out of Chicago entirely, started over in cities where their faces and names didn't carry federal baggage. But Carlos? Carlos kept the name. Rack Boy Los. Still using it in 2026, 11 years after the indictment that should have buried that brand forever. That's not nostalgia. That's not loyalty to a crew that doesn't exist anymore. That's either supreme confidence that he's untouchable or a complete inability to recognize the target he's painting on his own back. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe Carlos kept the name because being Rack Boy Los meant something in the streets, commanded respect, opened doors, generated income through reputation alone. Maybe he calculated that the risk was worth the reward as long as he could control the narrative, control the witnesses, control the people who knew enough to hurt him. But you can't control someone who's already decided they're done protecting you. I need to back up for a second because there's a detail in this case that changes everything about how we understand the relationship between Carlos and Romeca. In the court filings, prosecutors mention that the footage of Carlos discussing Romeca burning his money orders, destroying his property, is heavily blurred and redacted. Not just his face, not just identifying information, but entire sections of his statements about her.
Why?
The standard reason for blurring footage in an investigation is to protect ongoing cases, to avoid revealing investigative techniques, or to shield the identities of cooperating witnesses. But Romeca is dead. You can't protect a deceased person's identity as a cooperating witness. So, what's being protected by those redactions? One theory: Romeca had already given statements to law enforcement before her death. Maybe not as a formal cooperating witness, but during the custody investigation, during child welfare checks, during any of the dozens of legal touchpoints that happen when two parents with a troubled relationship fight over a child. Maybe investigators asked her about Carlos's income. Maybe she told the truth. Maybe those truths are now part of an active investigation, and showing Carlos's statements about her would reveal the scope of what she'd already disclosed. Another theory, darker and more disturbing: the footage is blurred because Carlos's own words implicate him in ways he didn't realize at the time. When you're ranting about your baby mama destroying your stuff, you're not thinking about how admitting you keep $10,000 in money orders in a suitcase might sound to a federal prosecutor. You're not calculating how explaining your loss has been crazy creates a pattern of unexplained wealth. You're just venting, just talking, just telling your side of the story. But every word you say is evidence. Every detail you volunteer is another thread prosecutors can pull. And if Romeca died under suspicious circumstances, if there's any investigation into whether her death was truly accidental or something more deliberate, then Carlos's own social media history becomes a roadmap of motive. Which brings us to the central question of this entire case: was Romeca Meeks murdered? The official story, the public narrative, remains unclear because, as of now, there's been no formal announcement of charges related to her death. But the court statement about Carlos having motive and interest to testify against a deceased woman suggests something darker than natural causes. You don't have motive to control the narrative about someone's death unless there's something about that death that needs explaining. Let me walk you through what we know and what we don't know. We know Romeca died on September 6, 2025. We know Carlos was still allegedly running card fraud that same weekend. We know he scrubbed his social media 3 days later. We know the custody battle was active and contentious. We know Romeca had information that could potentially end his freedom. We know the court's identified bias in how he discusses her after her death. What we don't know: cause of death, circumstances, whether there's an active homicide investigation, whether anyone has been named as a suspect, whether the motive and interest language from the court refers to her death specifically or to the broader fraud case that might be building against Carlos. But here's what experience with these cases teaches us. When courts use language that's specific, that unusual, that unprecedented in American legal history, they're signaling something. They're putting defense attorneys on notice. They're creating a record that establishes bias before a witness even takes the stand. They're saying, "We see what you're doing, and we're not going to let you manipulate the narrative about this woman now that she can't speak for herself." That's not the language of a simple custody dispute. That's the language of a criminal investigation where the credibility of a key witness, someone with motive to lie, is already being challenged by prosecutors who know more than they're saying publicly. Let's talk about what makes someone disposable in street economics. It's not hatred. It's not even anger, really. It's math. Cold, brutal mathematics where you weigh the value of someone's silence against the risk of their testimony. Romeca's value to Carlos was clear. She was the mother of his child, someone who'd kept his secrets for years, someone who understood the life and accepted it as the price of the relationship. But her risk was equally clear. She knew too much, was involved in a custody battle that required financial disclosures, had already demonstrated her willingness to destroy his money when angry, and based on the court language, may have already started cooperating with authorities in some capacity. In that equation, if you're someone who's been evading federal charges for 11 years, someone who watched 29 people go down while you somehow stayed free, someone who's still running the same scam that should have ended your freedom in 2014, what do you do with a liability that big? Most people in that situation break up, move on, negotiate custody through lawyers, maybe pay child support to keep things civil. They don't escalate to violence because the risk of a murder charge outweighs the risk of whatever the other person might say. But what if you're not facing a custody battle? What if you're facing Rico charges, federal conspiracy counts, evidence of an 11-year fraud pattern that never stopped? What if the person who could testify against you isn't just an angry ex, but someone who witnessed, participated in, or at minimum knew about criminal activity that carries decades of federal prison time? That changes the math entirely. I want to be extremely clear about something because this is where true crime coverage often fails victims. I am not saying Carlos murdered Romeca. I'm saying the court has identified him as someone with motive and bias regarding her death, which is a legal conclusion that prosecutors don't make lightly. I'm saying the pattern of behavior, the timing, the social media scrubbing, the 11-year history of alleged fraud, all of it creates questions that deserve investigation. But Romeca deserves more than speculation. She deserves to be remembered as more than just someone who knew too much, more than just a liability in someone else's criminal enterprise. So let me tell you what the people who loved her say, what emerges from between the lines of court documents and social media posts and the scattered fragments of a life cut short. Romeca was a mother who was trying to build something legitimate with those vending machine eyelashes. Trying to protect her children in a custody battle she didn't want to be fighting. Trying to navigate the impossible situation of sharing a child with someone whose lifestyle put both of them at risk. The court documents, even the ones arguing against her, never question her love for her children. Never suggest she was neglectful or abusive or anything other than a woman fighting to maintain custody in a system designed to punish poverty and proximity to crime. She was in her 20s, raising kids, building a business that might not have been glamorous but was honest, was legal, was something she could put her name on without fear. And she was doing it while knowing that the father of her child was allegedly still running frauds that could collapse their entire world at any moment. Think about the stress of that existence. Every time police lights appeared in the neighborhood, every time Carlos posted something incriminating on social media, every time a court date approached that might require financial disclosure, Romeca had to calculate, do I protect him or protect myself? Do I stay silent and risk becoming an accomplice? Or do I speak up and risk losing my child to a custody battle I can't afford? She chose her children. The evidence suggests she started choosing her children over Carlos's secrets. And if the timeline is what it appears to be, that choice might have cost her everything. Here's where the case gets even stranger. The ongoing existence of Rackboy Los as a brand, as an identity, as a social media presence that continues to operate even after Romeca's death, even after the social media purge, even with the court making statements about motive and bias. If Carlos is under investigation, if there's any scrutiny on him related to Romeca's death or the broader fraud pattern, why would he continue using a name that's literally in a federal indictment from 2014? There are a few possibilities. 1. He genuinely believes he's untouchable, that 11 years of evading charges means he's smarter than the system, that he can keep operating indefinitely. 2. The Rackboy Los identity is so valuable to him financially, socially, psychologically that abandoning it would mean admitting defeat, admitting fear, admitting that the feds won. 3. He's been an informant all along, which would explain how he survived an indictment that took down 29 people, would explain the unusual court language about his testimony, would explain why he's been able to operate openly for over a decade. That third possibility is the one that haunts the comment sections, the social media discussions, the whispered conversations in Chicago neighborhoods that remember the original Rackboys case. How does one person remain standing when an entire organization falls? The cynical answer, the one born from decades of watching how the criminal justice system actually operates, he gave them bigger fish. He cooperated quietly, provided information that led to other arrests, maintained his street credibility while secretly feeding intelligence to the same prosecutors who should have charged him. But if Carlos was an informant, if he'd been cooperating for years, that creates an even darker possibility regarding Romeca. Because informants aren't untouchable. Their protection lasts exactly as long as they're useful, as long as they don't create problems that outweigh their value. And if Romeca was threatening to expose not just the fraud but the cooperation, not just the crimes but the snitching, that's a threat to both Carlos and the federal agents who'd been running him as a source. I'm speculating now, building theories on top of questions on top of suspicious patterns. But that's where this case lives. In the space between what we know and what we suspect, between official silence and street rumors, between a woman's death and a man's motive to control the story of that death. Let's ground ourselves in the concrete evidence again. September 6th, 2025, Romeca dies. Same weekend, Carlos allegedly uses a fraudulent card on video. September 9th, 2025, Carlos scrubs his social media of specific fraud advertisements while maintaining the rack boy Los identity. January 8th, 2026, a court filing states Carlos has motive, interest, and bias to testify in a certain way regarding his deceased former partner. February 2026, no public charges announced in connection with Romeca's death, but the investigation appears to be active based on the unusual court language and redacted evidence. What happens in the gap between September and January? What investigation is happening behind the scenes? What witnesses are being interviewed? What evidence is being processed? What case is being built that requires a court to preemptively establish that Carlos's testimony about Romeca should be viewed with extreme skepticism? You don't poison a witness's credibility 4 months before a trial unless you know that witness is going to be central to the case. You don't call out bias that specifically unless you're anticipating that the defense will try to use Carlos's statements about Romeca to establish a narrative that prosecutors believe is false. Here's what I think is happening, based on patterns from similar cases. There's a federal investigation into Carlos that predates Romeca's death. That investigation, like the one in 2014, is focused on card fraud, identity theft, bank fraud, possibly wire fraud, and conspiracy charges that carry serious time. Romeca became relevant to that investigation either through the custody case, through her own statements to authorities, or through evidence seized from shared devices or accounts. At some point before her death, Romeca either formally cooperated or made statements that could be used against Carlos. Her death creates a legal problem. You can't cross-examine a dead witness, can't challenge their testimony, can't present evidence that contradicts their statements. But you also can't let a defendant benefit from the silencing of a witness who could have buried them. So prosecutors do what they did in this case. They establish for the record, months before any trial, that Carlos has motive to mischaracterize Romeca, to paint her as unreliable or vindictive or motivated by spite rather than truth. They create a paper trail that says, whatever this defendant claims about the deceased witness, remember that he benefits from her silence. That's not standard procedure. That's prosecutors who believe they're dealing with a defendant who might have done more than just commit fraud. That's prosecutors who are building a case where the victim's death and the defendant's criminal enterprise are connected in ways they can't yet prove, but deeply suspect. And if that's what's happening, if federal prosecutors are looking at Romeca's death as potentially connected to Carlos's alleged ongoing fraud and her knowledge of it, then we're not just talking about bank fraud anymore. We're talking about witness tampering at minimum, possibly obstruction of justice, possibly conspiracy to commit murder if there's evidence that Carlos wasn't acting alone. Because here's the thing about making someone disappear. You need help. You need an alibi, you need cleanup, you need time and space, and the kind of resources that a person running solo can't always access. But if you're part of a crew, even a fractured one, even one that officially disbanded a decade ago, you have access to people who know how to make problems disappear, who've already proven they're willing to break laws, who understand that loyalty in the streets means protecting each other from consequences. The Band Clan, the faction that supposedly split from the Rack Boys after the 2014 indictment. Where are they in this story? The other Smuffies, as the transcript calls them, the people who are still running card frauds alongside Carlos in 2025. Where were they the weekend Romeca died? Who had access to her? Who had motive beyond Carlos himself? Because if prosecutors are looking at this as a conspiracy, they're not just investigating Carlos. They're investigating everyone in his circle who benefited from Romeca's silence and suffered from her potential testimony. They're building a Rico case, the same kind of organizational prosecution that took down 29 defendants in 2014, but this time with a body count. Let me take you inside the impossible position Romeca faced in the months before her death. She's fighting for custody of her children against a man who has more money than she does, money that comes from sources he can't legally explain. She's trying to build a legitimate business that can barely compete with the lifestyle he can offer the kids. She's watching him post evidence of ongoing crimes on social media while she's selling eyelashes out of a vending machine. Every court date, every lawyer meeting, every custody evaluation, she has to make a choice. Tell the truth about where his money comes from and risk being labeled a snitch, a hater, someone trying to weaponize the system against the father of her child, or stay silent and watch as the court potentially grants custody to someone she knows is a flight risk. Someone who could disappear with their children if federal charges finally catch up to him. There's no good option in that scenario. Silence risks losing her children to someone whose lifestyle could implode at any moment. Speaking up risks her safety, her reputation in communities where cooperation with law enforcement is seen as the ultimate betrayal, and potentially her freedom if prosecutors decide she was complicit in crimes she witnessed.
So, what does she do?
Based on the court documents, based on the language about her being a witness, based on the prosecutor's concerns about Carlos's motive to mischaracterize her, Romeca chose to speak. Maybe not to police directly, but to her lawyers in depositions, in custody filings that would become part of the record. She started telling the truth about Carlos's income, his lifestyle, his pattern of behavior that no personal training business could possibly support. And in doing so, she signed her own death warrant. I need to pause here and acknowledge something. I'm constructing a narrative from fragments, building a theory from court language and suspicious timing and the mathematical logic of motive. I don't know that Carlos killed Romeca. I don't know that anyone killed Romeca. Her cause of death hasn't been publicly released. There's been no murder charge announced. Everything I'm saying is inference, pattern recognition, the kind of analysis that comes from studying hundreds of these cases and recognizing when the official silence speaks louder than any press release. But here's what I do know. Courts don't say defendants have motive and interest to testify against a deceased person unless that person's death is relevant to the case. They don't create a credibility record about a witness's statements regarding a dead woman unless those statements matter to the prosecution. And they don't do it 4 months after the death unless there's an active investigation that's moving toward charges. Something is happening in this case that we're not seeing. The public evidence is just the surface, the visible portion of an investigation that's happening in grand jury rooms and federal offices and sealed court filings that won't be made public until arrests are made. And if arrests are coming, if the federal government is finally closing the loop on the one defendant who escaped the 2014 Rack Boys indictment, then Romeca's death isn't just a tragedy. It's evidence. It's motive. It's the final piece of a pattern that shows what someone is willing to do to avoid accountability. Let's talk about the children, because they're the silent victims in all of this. Romeca's kids, who lost their mother at the beginning of September 2025. One of them was 3 months old. 3 months. An infant who will never know her mother's voice, never remember her face except through photos and videos, never understand the impossible choices Romeca made trying to protect her. Carlos's children, who are now being raised by a man the courts have identified as having motive and interest to control the narrative about their mother's death. What does it do to a child to grow up with that weight? To eventually, inevitably, learn the truth about how their mother died and who might have been responsible? To have to reconcile the father who raised them with the possibility that he's the reason they lost their mother in the first place? This is the generational trauma that violence creates. It's not just the immediate loss. It's the decades of damage that ripple forward, the questions that haunt every family gathering, the silences that grow where honest conversation should be, the knowledge that love and loyalty can coexist with unforgivable harm. If Carlos is guilty of what prosecutors seem to suspect, if he had anything to do with Romeca's death, then he's not just a murderer. He's a man who orphaned his own children to protect his freedom. He's someone who calculated that his kids would be better off without a mother than he would be in federal prison. That's a level of selfishness, of moral bankruptcy, that defies comprehension. But even if he's innocent, even if Romeca's death was truly unconnected to the fraud case and the custody battle and the pattern of suspicious behavior, Carlos still made choices that harmed his children. He chose to maintain a criminal lifestyle that put his family at risk. He chose to post evidence of ongoing fraud on social media where his kids could see it, where their classmates' parents could see it, where law enforcement could build a case that might still take him away from them. Either way, those children are victims of his choices. The transcript I'm working from contains a provocative phrase that's been haunting me. Romeca was a good mom, just bad for business. It's said almost flippantly, like it's a clever turn of phrase, but unpack what it actually means. A good mom, meaning she loved her children, cared for them, fought to protect them. Bad for business, meaning her presence, her knowledge, her potential testimony threaten the continued operation of a criminal enterprise. That phrase encapsulates the entire moral rot at the heart of this case. It treats motherhood and criminality as competing interests, suggests that Romeca's value as a parent was somehow in tension with her danger as a witness. It reduces a woman's life to a business calculation, a risk-benefit analysis, where the benefit of her silence couldn't outweigh the risk of her testimony. How does someone arrive at that calculus? How do you look at the mother of your child and see a threat that needs to be eliminated rather than a person who deserves protection? The answer lies in the economics of the streets, the mathematics that value money over morality, freedom over family, self-preservation over every other consideration. When you've been running the same scam for 11 years, when you've somehow avoided charges that took down 29 other people, when you're still posting 10K or better for Navy Federal in 2025 like the statute of limitations means nothing, you're not thinking like a father or a partner or a community member. You're thinking like a fugitive who's been delaying the inevitable, and every person who knows your secrets is a countdown timer to when that inevitable finally arrives. Romeca wasn't bad for business because she was malicious or vindictive. She was bad for business because she was a mother who chose her children's safety over a criminal's need for silence. That's not a character flaw. That's courage. That's what good mothers do when faced with impossible choices. And if Carlos or anyone in his circle harmed her for that courage, then they didn't just kill a woman. They killed the part of themselves that was still capable of choosing right over easy, that still valued life over money, that still understood some lines can't be uncrossed no matter how much prison time you're facing. I want to address something that might be on your mind right now. Why am I spending 90 minutes on a case where there haven't been any murder charges filed, where the cause of death isn't public, where everything I'm saying is speculative? Fair question. Here's my answer, because this is how these cases work. The public doesn't see the investigation until the investigation is ready to show itself. Grand juries operate in secret. Federal prosecutors build their cases over months or years, interviewing every witness, analyzing every piece of evidence, making sure their charges will stick before they ever file them. The O.J. Simpson case didn't become public knowledge until he was arrested. The Laci Peterson investigation happened largely behind the scenes before Scott Peterson was charged. The Gabby Petito case had weeks of investigation before the FBI confirmed it was a homicide. That's how it works. Silence doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means something is happening that we're not allowed to see yet. And in this case, the court has already shown its hand. By identifying Carlos as having motive and interest to testify against a deceased person, prosecutors have signaled that Romeca's death is part of the case they're building. They've established bias before a trial has even been announced. That's not something you do unless you're anticipating that the defendant will try to blame the victim, will try to paint her as unreliable or motivated by spite, will try to use her death to escape accountability for what she knew. So I'm spending 90 minutes on this case because I believe the charges are coming. I believe federal prosecutors are doing now what they should have done in 2014, building a Rico case that doesn't just charge fraud, but charges the conspiracy that enabled that fraud, the violence that protected that conspiracy, and the silencing of witnesses who threatened to expose it all. And when those charges come, when the indictment is unsealed and the arrests are made, and the full scope of the investigation becomes public, Romeca's name will be in that document. She'll be listed as a witness, possibly as a victim, definitely as someone whose cooperation threatened defendants enough that they felt compelled to act. Her death won't be a footnote. It'll be the evidence that transforms a fraud case into a murder case, that shows the jury exactly what these defendants were willing to do to protect their operation. Let me walk you through what a federal Rico prosecution might look like in this case, because understanding the legal framework helps explain why Romeca's knowledge made her so dangerous. Rico, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, was designed to prosecute organized crime by targeting the enterprise itself, not just individual crimes. To prove a Rico case, prosecutors need to establish 1. An enterprise exists, an organized group working toward common criminal goals. 2. A pattern of racketeering activity, multiple crimes committed as part of the enterprise's operations. 3. Participation in the enterprise by each defendant. 4. Interstate commerce involvement, which is basically automatic in any fraud case involving banks or electronic transfers. The 2014 RAC Boys indictment checked all those boxes. They had an identified enterprise, the RAC Boys organization. They had a pattern of activity, hundreds of fraudulent card cracks over months or years. They had participant defendants, 29 people charged with various roles in the conspiracy. And they had interstate commerce through the banking system. But here's where it gets interesting. Rico also allows for charges related to witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and murder if those crimes were committed in furtherance of the enterprise. If prosecutors can show that Romeca was killed to prevent her testimony about the enterprise's ongoing operations, that's not just a murder charge. That's a Rico murder, which carries life in prison and takes the death penalty off the table only because Illinois doesn't have capital punishment. That's why the court's language about motive and bias matters so much. Prosecutors are building a record that shows Carlos had multiple reasons to silence Romeca: to prevent her testimony in the fraud case, to protect his custody interests, to eliminate a witness who could prove the enterprise never actually disbanded after 2014 but merely rebranded and continued operating. Each of those motives supports a different charge. Each of those charges carries serious time. And together, they paint a picture of a defendant who wasn't just running a scam, but was willing to kill to protect it. Now, let's talk about the social media purge, because it's a crucial piece of evidence that shows consciousness of guilt. 3 days after Romeca dies, Carlos deletes posts advertising Navy federal cracks for $10,000 or more. But he doesn't delete everything. He keeps the RAC Boy Los name. He keeps his presence online. He keeps operating, just more carefully with less obvious evidence of the specific fraud schemes. That's the behavior of someone who knows investigators are coming but is trying to limit the damage. If you are innocent, if your baby mama's death was truly unrelated to your criminal activity, you wouldn't need to purge anything. You'd mourn, you'd deal with custody arrangements, you'd continue your life. But if you knew her death would trigger an investigation, if you knew prosecutors would be looking at your finances and your social media and your pattern of behavior, then you'd do exactly what Carlos did. Erase the most incriminating evidence while maintaining your presence and identity. It's the digital equivalent of cleaning a crime scene. You can't make it pristine, can't erase every trace of what happened, but you can remove the most obvious evidence that would immediately incriminate you. The problem is that digital forensics don't care about deletion. Screenshots exist. Archives exist. People who saw those posts and saved them exist. The evidence doesn't actually disappear. It just moves to places the defendant can't control. And that's where cases like this get solved. In the screenshot someone saved, in the archives investigators pull, in the testimony of people who saw the posts before they were deleted and can testify to what they said. Carlos might think he cleaned up his exposure by deleting those posts. But all he actually did was create evidence of consciousness of guilt, a legal term that means your behavior shows you knew you did something wrong. Innocent people don't purge their social media after a loved one dies. Guilty people do. Here's something that's been gnawing at me throughout this entire analysis: the timeline between the 2014 indictment and Romeca's 2025 death. 11 years. That's how long Carlos allegedly kept operating, kept using the RAC Boy Los name, kept running card frauds despite watching 29 people go to prison for the exact same crimes. What does that do to a person psychologically? What happens when you escape accountability once, twice, 100 times? When you start to believe you're smarter than the system, when you develop a sense of invincibility that makes you sloppy, makes you careless, makes you post 10K or better for Navy Federal on public social media, like the feds aren't watching. It creates a dangerous combination: overconfidence plus desperation. You believe you can't be caught because you haven't been caught, so you keep escalating. But you're also terrified of the moment when your luck runs out, when the past finally catches up, when someone who knows too much decides they're done protecting you. In that mental state, someone like Romeca transforms from a partner to a threat. Every argument becomes a risk that she'll weaponize her knowledge. Every custody hearing becomes an opportunity for her to expose you. Every day she stays alive is another day she could decide to cooperate, to testify, to burn down the operation you've spent 11 years protecting. The psychology of that situation doesn't excuse violence. Nothing excuses violence, but it explains how someone could arrive at the calculation that murder is preferable to prison. When you've been free for 11 years while everyone else fell, when you've built an identity around being the last rat boy standing, when your freedom depends entirely on the continued silence of people who have every reason to speak, you start to see those people not as humans, but as variables in an equation you need to solve. And the permanent solution to a witness problem is the one that can't recant, can't change their mind, can't testify under oath about everything they saw and heard and knew. Let's talk about the blurred footage, because that detail has generated more speculation than almost anything else in this case. In the videos where Carlos discusses Romeca destroying his property, burning his money orders, costing him tens of thousands in losses, the footage is heavily redacted. Not just faces blurred, but entire sections of content removed, portions of his statements made inaudible or visually obscured. The transcript I'm working from suggests two possible explanations. 1. Romeca was already cooperating with law enforcement before her death, and the footage is redacted because it contains information that's part of an active investigation. 2. Carlos himself is a cooperating witness, possibly has been since 2014, and the redactions protect his identity and his role as an informant. Both explanations are plausible. Both are disturbing. If Romeca was cooperating, it establishes her as a witness whose death directly benefited Carlos. If Carlos is an informant, it means he's been operating under federal protection for years, which raises questions about whether that protection would extend to covering up a murder or whether the feds would finally cut him loose if they believed he killed a witness. But there's a third possibility that I think is more likely. The footage is redacted because it contains specific details about fraud schemes that prosecutors want to use at trial. When Carlos talks about losing tens of thousands to Romeca burning money orders, he's essentially confessing to possessing large amounts of likely fraudulent financial instruments. When he discusses his losses, he's documenting a pattern of unexplained wealth that no legitimate business could generate. Prosecutors don't want that evidence made public before trial because it could taint the jury pool, could give defense attorneys ammunition for change of venue motions, could compromise the integrity of the case they're building. So they redact it now, seal it in court filings, keep it quiet until they're ready to present it to a grand jury or a trial jury. That's the most mundane explanation, but it's also the most legally sound. It doesn't require conspiracy theories or informant protection programs. It just requires prosecutors doing their job, protecting evidence until they're ready to use it. But here's what all three explanations have in common. They all suggest there's an active criminal investigation where Romeca's knowledge and Carlos's statements about her are central to the case. They all suggest that her death occurred at a moment when she posed maximum risk to someone's freedom. And they all suggest that the official silence we're experiencing now is the calm before criminal charges that could reshape how we understand this entire case. I need to address the elephant in the room. Am I accusing Carlos of murder without evidence? Am I engaging in the kind of speculation that destroys innocent people's reputations based on suspicious circumstances and legal language that might not mean what I think it means? Fair questions. Here's my answer. I'm not accusing Carlos of anything. I'm analyzing publicly available information, court documents that anyone can access, social media posts that he chose to make public, and patterns of behavior that prosecutors themselves have identified as concerning. I'm doing what true crime analysis does. I'm connecting dots, building theories, and asking questions that the official investigation won't answer until they're ready to file charges. If Carlos is innocent, if Romeca's death was truly unrelated to the fraud investigation and the custody battle and the pattern of suspicious behavior, then a thorough investigation will establish that. The truth will exonerate him. The evidence will tell a different story than the one I'm constructing from incomplete information. But if he's guilty, if prosecutors are building the case I think they're building, then what I'm doing here is important. I'm creating a public record that explains why Romeca's death matters, why her knowledge made her dangerous, why the courts are already establishing that Carlos can't be trusted to tell the truth about her now that she's gone. This is accountability before charges are filed. This is making sure that if Carlos or anyone in his circle harmed Romeca, the public understands the context, the motive, the pattern of behavior that led to this moment. And if I'm wrong, If everything I've said here turns out to be baseless speculation that misread court documents and assigned sinister meaning to innocent coincidences, then I'll say so. I'll correct the record. I'll acknowledge that I constructed a narrative that the evidence didn't support. But I don't think I'm wrong. I think Romeca Meeks was killed because she knew too much, because she chose her children over a criminal's need for silence, because she was bad for business in a world where business matters more than life. Let me bring this back to the question I posed at the beginning. Was Romeca a good mom? The answer is yes. Unequivocally yes. Everything about her final year of life suggests a woman who was fighting to protect her children from a lifestyle that could destroy them. She was building a legitimate business, competing for custody, trying to create stability in a situation defined by chaos and crime. But was she bad for business? Also yes. From the perspective of someone running a criminal enterprise, someone who'd evaded charges for 11 years, someone whose freedom depended on silence and loyalty, Romeca was the ultimate threat. She knew too much. She had too much leverage. She was involved in legal proceedings that could force the truth into the open. That tension between being a good mother and being a business liability is what killed her. Not the fraud itself, not Carlos's criminal lifestyle, but the moment when those two identities collided and he had to choose between his freedom and her life. He chose himself. If the evidence supports what I believe it will, if charges are filed and the investigation becomes public, that's the choice that will emerge. A man who valued his freedom more than the life of his child's mother, more than his children's right to grow up with both parents, more than any notion of morality or humanity or basic decency. That's the choice that defines monsters. Not their crimes, but the calculations they make when forced to choose between accountability and violence. Carlos had other options. He could have stopped the fraud, could have accepted the custody arrangement Romeca wanted, could have built a legitimate life that his children could be proud of. But he didn't. He kept running the scam, kept using the Rack Boy Los name, kept posting evidence of fraud on social media like he was untouchable. And when the woman who knew his secrets threatened to expose him, he made a choice. The courts say he has motive and interest to testify against a deceased person. I say it's simpler than that. He has motive to be grateful she's not alive to testify against him. As we move toward the end of this analysis, I want to circle back to something that's troubled me from the beginning: the normalization of fraud in communities where legitimate economic opportunities are scarce. Card cracking isn't a victimless crime, despite how it's portrayed in the rap videos and social media posts. Every fraudulent transaction costs banks money, which they recoup through fees that fall hardest on working-class account holders. Every successful scam reinforces the mythology that fraud is a viable career path, pulling more people into criminal activity that will eventually destroy their lives. The 2014 Rack Boys case should have been a lesson. 29 defendants facing state and federal charges, lives ruined, families torn apart, decades of prison time distributed among people who thought they'd found an easy way to make money. But instead of learning that lesson, people like Carlos looked at that indictment and thought, I can do it better. I can avoid getting caught. And for 11 years, he was right. He did avoid getting caught, did maintain his operation, did keep the dream alive while everyone else either went to prison or moved on to legitimate lives. But that success came at a cost. It required violence or the threat of violence to maintain silence, required treating people like Romeca as disposable when they became inconvenient, required a level of moral compromise that transforms you into someone your children won't be able to respect when they're old enough to understand the truth. Was it worth it? 11 years of freedom, of money, of maintaining the Rack Boy Los identity, versus what's likely coming: federal charges, Rico conspiracy, possible murder counts, life in prison if convicted. The mathematics of that trade seems obvious from the outside. But when you're inside it, when you've built your entire identity around being the one who got away, when you spent a decade developing the arrogance that comes from escaping consequences, you can't see the trap you've built for yourself. You just keep running, keep hustling, keep believing that the next scam, the next purge of social media, the next silenced witness will finally make you safe. But safety never comes. The past always catches up. And the more you run, the worse it is when you finally hit the wall. Carlos hit that wall on September 6, 2025, whether he knows it yet or not. Because if prosecutors are building the case I think they're building, if Romeca's death is the final piece of evidence that transforms a fraud investigation into a murder case, then everything he did to protect his freedom will be the evidence that takes it away forever. Here's what I can't stop thinking about: the children. Romeca's kids, who will grow up with fragments of their mother's memory, with questions about how she died that might never be fully answered, with the knowledge that they were 3 months old, or 3 years old, or whatever age they were when they lost the person who loved them most in the world. What do you tell them when they're old enough to ask? How do you explain that their mother died under suspicious circumstances, that the courts identified their father as having motive and bias regarding her death, that she might have been killed for choosing them over his secrets? You can't protect them from that truth forever. Eventually, they'll Google Romeca's name. They'll find court documents, news articles, videos like this one analyzing their family's tragedy. They'll have to reconcile the father who raised them with the possibility that he's the reason they lost their mother. That's generational trauma in its purest form. That's the legacy of violence. Not just the immediate loss, but the decades of psychological damage, the identity confusion, the trust issues that come from learning your parent might be a murderer. If Carlos is guilty, if he had anything to do with Romeca's death, then he didn't just kill his children's mother. He condemned them to a lifetime of processing that betrayal, of wondering what they inherited from him, of fearing that his capacity for violence might live inside them too. That's the real cost of this case, beyond the legal charges, beyond the prison time, beyond any notion of earthly justice. It's the children who will carry this weight for the rest of their lives, who will have to build their identities in the shadow of their mother's death and their father's suspected involvement in it. And there's no sentence, no punishment, no accountability that can make that right. The damage is done. The trauma is permanent. The best we can do is make sure the truth comes out, make sure Romeca's death isn't dismissed as just another tragedy in a community used to tragedy, make sure that whoever killed her faces consequences that at least acknowledge the magnitude of what they took from those children. Let me address one final question. What happens next? Based on similar cases, based on the pattern of court language and investigation timeline, here's what I expect. Within the next 6 to 12 months, federal prosecutors will unseal an indictment charging Carlos and possibly others with Rico conspiracy, bank fraud, wire fraud, and potentially obstruction of justice or witness tampering related to Romeca's death. The indictment will detail a fraud scheme that operated from at least 2014 through 2025 that generated millions in losses, that involved dozens of participants over the years. Romeca will be named in that indictment, possibly as a witness, possibly as a victim, definitely as someone whose cooperation threatened the enterprise. The cause of her death will be revealed, and if it wasn't natural causes or an unrelated accident, homicide charges will be added. Carlos will be arrested, likely without incident, because federal prosecutors don't move until they're certain the defendant can't flee. He'll appear in court, plead not guilty, and begin the process of fighting charges that carry decades in prison if convicted. Discovery will reveal the extent of what Romeca knew and when she started cooperating. The blurred footage will be unredacted. The social media posts he deleted will be recovered from archives and other users' devices. The pattern of behavior that I've been analyzing from fragments will become a complete narrative presented to a jury. And then we'll know. We'll know if my analysis was accurate or if I constructed a conspiracy from suspicious coincidences. We'll know if Romeca was killed for what she knew or if her death was a genuine tragedy unconnected to Carlos's criminal activity. We'll know if justice is possible or if, once again, the last rat boy finds a way to escape accountability. I'm betting on justice. I'm betting that federal prosecutors have been building this case carefully, thoroughly, with a kind of attention to detail that transforms a complex fraud and possible murder case into charges that stick. I'm betting that Romeca's cooperation, her knowledge, her courage to choose her children over a criminal's need for silence, will be the evidence that finally ends the Rat Boy saga that should have ended in 2014. But even if I'm wrong, even if charges never come, this case has revealed something important about the economics of the streets, about the impossible choices faced by women who share children with criminals, about the calculations that transform partners into threats and mothers into liabilities. Romeca Meeks was a good mom. She was trying to protect her children from a lifestyle that could destroy them. She was building something legitimate while the father of her child allegedly continued the same criminal activity that had sent 24 people to prison years earlier. She made the brave choice to speak truth in a context where silence is enforced through intimidation and violence. And if that choice got her killed, then her death isn't just a tragedy. It's evidence. It's proof of what someone was willing to do to protect their freedom. It's a testament to the courage it takes for women in her position to choose accountability over complicity, children over criminals, truth over self-preservation. That's the story I wanted to tell over these 90 minutes. Not just the mechanics of fraud and investigation, but the human cost. The woman who tried to do right in an impossible situation. The children who lost their mother. The community that's left wondering whether justice is possible when the people who should have gone to prison in 2014 are still free, still operating, still posting on social media like they're untouchable. So here's my question for you, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. Where's the line between loyalty and complicity? When does keeping someone's secrets make you an accomplice to their crimes? At what point does staying silent to protect your child's father become staying silent while he destroys other people's lives? Romeca found her line. She crossed it, choosing her children's safety over Carlos's secrets. And if the evidence supports what prosecutors seem to believe, that choice might have cost her everything. Where's your line? When does love stop being enough reason to stay silent? When does protecting your family require exposing the crimes of someone in that family? Leave your answer below. This isn't theoretical. Women face this choice every day. Stay with the person who's committing crimes, keep their secrets, hope you can manage the risk, or speak up, cooperate with law enforcement, blow up your family to protect your children from a future where their father's in prison. There's no easy answer, but there's a right answer, and Romeca found it even though it might have killed her. If this case moved you, if you understand why Romeca's choice matters, if you want to see justice for a woman who is trying to protect her children from criminal fallout, hit the like button. Subscribe for cases that explore the impossible mathematics of street economics, the choices people make when caught between loyalty and survival, the human cost of crimes that get treated like harmless hustles. Because somewhere tonight, there's another woman in Romeca's position. Another mother who knows too much, who's watching the father of her child commit crimes that could destroy their family, who's calculating whether speaking up is worth the risk. And the choice she makes matters more than she knows. Romeca chose her children. She chose truth over silence. She chose to be a good mom even though it made her bad for business. That choice should have protected her. Instead, it might have gotten her killed. And if it did, then the person responsible needs to face consequences that acknowledge what they took. Not just a life, but a mother, a witness, a woman who is brave enough to choose right over easy in a context where that choice can be fatal. That's the weight of this case. That's why it matters. That's why I've spent 90 minutes analyzing court documents and social media posts and suspicious patterns of behavior. Because Romeca Meeks deserves justice. Her children deserve truth. And the last rat boy standing needs to fall, finally, permanently, with the full weight of federal law enforcement behind it. The charges are coming. The investigation is active. The evidence is being gathered. And when the indictment is unsealed, we'll know if everything I've said here was accurate or if I saw conspiracy where there was only coincidence. I'm betting on accuracy. I'm betting on justice. I'm betting that Romeca's courage to speak truth will be the evidence that finally ends the criminal enterprise that should have ended in 2014. And if I'm right, if charges come and convictions follow, then Romeca's legacy won't just be the children she left behind. It'll be the case that proved speaking up matters, that protecting your children from criminal fallout is worth the risk, that being a good mom sometimes means being bad for business. That's not a tragedy. That's heroism. And heroes deserve to be remembered for their courage, not just their deaths. Remember Romeca Meeks. Remember what she risked. Remember why she matters. And when the charges come, when the truth emerges, when justice finally catches up to the last rat boy standing, remember that it happened because a mother chose her children over a criminal's secrets. That's the power of one woman's courage. That's the weight of truth in a world built on silence. That's why this case matters beyond the legal charges and the courtroom drama and the sensational headlines that will eventually emerge. Romeca Meeks was a good mom, just bad for business. And in the end, being bad for business was the most righteous thing she could have been.